Once the screen changes for the Historic Review Board, we know that we are live. Nope. All right. Chair Ferry, we're ready for you when you're ready. And
Thank
Paul
you.
is logging in, so we definitely have a quorum tonight.
So sorry, I'm trying to pull up my agenda. It's coming up. Small children and technology. Um, I'm so sorry, guys.
It's okay. I think we can start with a call to order and a call of members, if that works.
Yeah, so I now call to order the November 28th meeting of the Historic Review Board.
The members present. Want to call out Tim Powell?
Like,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like Board Member Powell.
I'm here.
Board Member Green.
I'm here.
Board Member Edgar.
Here.
And I, Chair Ferry, am here.
And Board Member Stobie is excused.
It looks like the first agenda, or the first item on our agenda is our meeting minutes. Would you like to do that first?
Yeah, we just have a state of meeting minutes. So if you have any comments for additions or revisions, if not, someone can make a motion to approve the package.
If there are no comments, I would move to approve the package.
I will second that.
All right. Board Member Green?
Aye.
Board Member Edgar?
Aye.
Board Member Powell?
Aye.
Chair Ferry?
Aye.
Motion carries. The minutes are approved.
All right. The next agenda item on the next item on our agenda is a preservation grant Preservation Grant 23-03, and it's for 409 3rd Street and its foundation repair.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ferry. The Historic Review Board in the City of Oregon City gives away 5 $1,000 grants each year. And that is really aimed at supporting historic homeowners and kind of the additional burden or work they have with historic siding and window repairs, kind of the mainstay that the board has over the years acknowledged that foundations for historic homes are usually extra complicated and have approved foundation repairs. What this grant doesn't usually pay for are things that any property owner would need to undertake, like painting or roof replacement or gutters. And so in this situation, the property owners, is it the Dead Keys? Am I saying that correctly? They have an historic home and they are working on a project for foundation repair, and they've put in a grant for $1,000, which is well above their project is well above the 50-50 match. And so at this point, staff does recommend approval. They have 2 bids and both are acceptable, and you do not have to take the lowest bid. So after kind of my presentation, I will hand it over to the Dead Keys if they want to say anything additionally. But the way the grant works is the board approves the proposal before work commences, and then after work is completed and paid, staff will do a site visit and will submit an invoice for payment for the $1,000 grant. The work has to be completed by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. And because this is taxable income, the applicant will work with myself and finance to turn in all the necessary information to track that. So I'll work with the applicant after this evening. A sign will be put up announcing our grant program in their window, and that is it. So I'm here if the board has any additional questions, and I know the Dead Keys are available if you want to ask them any question about their project. You're on mute, Sabrina.
Did you have a presentation that you're?
I don't necessarily have. In the staff report is, and I can share the staff report, which is attached to your packet, but it's pretty self-explanatory. So I don't need to go in. If you've read the staff report, I can answer any questions the board may have.
Does the board have any questions for Christina before we hear from the debt case?
I don't think I have any questions.
No, I don't have any.
I have none.
Great. Well, we'd love to hear from the debt case about your foundation repair.
Sure, yeah. So about, I don't know, I think earlier, a few months ago, we were walking down to our basement doing some laundry, and I'm not very detail oriented. Luckily, my wife is, but noticed a little bit of a light kind of coming in from below the kitchen, above the basement, however you want to put it. So, no, that's interesting. Never noticed that before. Probably should have someone come out. Had someone come out and basically was like, yeah, don't know exactly how it happened, but, things just moved around. It's an old house. And basically was, need to do something. Obviously, there's a few different options, but, the way he presented it was, need to do something sooner rather than later, just to, again, make sure things are good. House doesn't, move any more than it already has.
The main cause in his theory is that a previous owner or tenant had removed some essential beams from underneath in the basement and decided to place them in areas himself, which are not working. So most of it will be to replace those essential beams and get those in there, and they'll be adjustable and professional.
Mm-hmm. Oh, great. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant?
I would make one thing. Congratulations. Thank you.
Yes. We appreciate it. It's we love our old house, and
it's a beauty.
Yeah,
a beauty.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we want to keep it standing.
No questions for me.
Yeah. So one thing that the board can choose to do and has done in previous applications, if 5 grants aren't given out this fiscal year, the board can choose with this motion to direct staff to review any additional, basically the end of fiscal year funds, and if there are additional funds available, to share that with kind of the grantees for this year. So if, the 3 grants are given out this year and there's $2,000 left, that would be split with, the 3 grantees, and I can provide a secondary check to the applicants based, if there's an additional money left, and knowing that this project is well above any 50-50 match, that shouldn't be a problem.
I would concur in that assessment. Thank you, Christina.
I would then move for approval of the proposal for the maximum allowed funds, and if surplus funds are available at the end of the fiscal year, to split those remaining funds with the applicants we've had through this year.
I second it.
All right. Board Member Green?
Aye.
Board Member Edgar?
Aye.
Board Member Powell?
Aye.
Chair Ferry?
Aye.
Motion carries. So congratulations. I will send you a little sign in the mail to put up, and then when your project is finished, I'll come out and take a final. We do have the condition of approval about making sure that your foundation height isn't changed, but it doesn't sound like that's applicable in this situation. So let me know if you have any questions. And then as you get toward the end, and you've paid for the contractor, you can work with me on the reimbursement.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Good luck.
Good one.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, let's see. We We have, we'll now move into our public hearing part of our meeting. Apologize, I'm slightly under the weather. So this is for, first I read the thing, I apologize. Okay, so there is one public hearing on land use application scheduled tonight. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. Members of the Historic Review Board are to be unbiased. Before the start of the hearing, I will ask the board members whether they have any potential conflicts, such as family. I'm sorry. I apologize. I lost my family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any board members have discussed the application in question with any parties or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any board member about their disclosures. A staff report has been prepared for each applicant and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The quasi-judicial hearing procedure that the board will follow is set out in state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the chart. Anyone wishing to speak should fill out a speaker's card and email it to the planning staff before the hearing. Speakers will proceed in the order in which their card is received. You should fill out your address on the card so the city can notify you of its final decision. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed on the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the hearing is closed. If the Historic Review Board makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised on the record for the consideration of the City Commission or the Land Use Board of Appeals or both. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence that the city and all parties can respond to, the issue will not be deemed appealable to the City Commission or State Land Use Board of Appeals. In addition, the failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. We will now open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA 23-31 and HR 2310, demolition of the Clara Fields House at 408 McLoughlin Blvd. Request to demolish the house. The city recently purchased the site to allow for future improvements to the abutting Canemah Sanitary Pump station located at 408 McLoughlin. I will now ask each board member if they have any ex parte contacts, conflicts of interest, bias, or any other statement to declare, if they have made a site visit, and if they have noted any material information. Board member Powell.
I have been to the site. I have no bias and no personal interest.
Board member Edgar.
I have been to the site. I own property in Canemah that is serviced by the sanitary pump station. I have not had any contact with anyone, and I believe that I'm capable of making a decision.
Okay. And Board Member Green?
I visited the site, no ex parte contact or contact. So I assume that the station services my property. I was at the neighborhood association meeting in November, and this was mentioned to the group that it was coming up, and I had not yet availed myself of looking into what was required there, but I made no comment at the meeting, and there was no real comment or feedback at the meeting from the others there. So nothing from the neighborhood association.
Okay, thank you. And I have visited the site, and I have no ex parte contact or conflict of interest. Does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the board members about these disclosures? Hearing nothing, we will now proceed with the staff planning report.
All right. Thank you, Chair Ferry. The applicant for this proposal is our Public Works Department through the direction of the City Commission, who purchased the structure for the planned Canemah Sanitary Pump Station addition, which is not imminent, but it is planned in the future. So this, what the request is this evening is, with the purchase of this property abutting the pump station, as a request to demolish the property and basically cede the site. And as staff has added some additional conditions of approval related to landscaping. But what you see there on your right is a picture of the pump station, which is kind of the concrete block structure. And I think there's I think it's a speed sign trailer that's in front of it. And then the Clara Fields House is to your left. On the map, you'll see it is highlighted in yellow. It's a bit of an odd situation because these lot sizes have been changed over time and are not the typical 50 by 100 foot lots that you see in Canemah. This property has two abutting neighbors that have pretty significant homes. You have the Captain Miller house, which is kind of north of the property. And that was built in 1862. And then the E.B. Fellows house at 416 McLoughlin. So kind of in the middle of these pretty two significant Canemah houses is this Clara Fields House. So I have a kind of a pretty basic staff summary, and it really boils down to this property is a non-contributing resource in the district. The age of the structure has varied depending on which survey form you refer to. I've seen everything to 1900 to 1940. It very well could be a 1900 home that has been added over the time. But it is at this time a non-contributing resource of the district because of its exterior alterations and is non-contributing. The interior is severely dilapidated. I took a site visit with our Public Works Department this summer, and it is a very as simple as a hard one. It is a building that has not really been improved or touched for probably 40 years, and would require a significant amount of improvement if the city was to rent it out. And not knowing, how to amortize that out, not knowing the exact date of the pump station expansion is kind of a really hard lift. The pump station expansion could be in the next 5 to 15 years. And it is absolutely not in a position to rent out as a habitable structure currently. Staff recommends approving the demolition request and reseeding the area with additional landscaping. The board may consider a condition for deconstruction or a notice of availability for relocation that sometimes is pursued with a demolition request, and that can be added on as part of any discussions you have this evening. And any future construction on the site or addition to the pump station will come back to the Historic Review Board, either for review of compatibility or if it's a continuation of the simple addition, maybe what is the screening or approach to reduce any adverse effect to the district. So that's kind of the overall staff summary I have. I have some additional photos to show. Oh, sorry. I have 3 conditions of approval. One, of course, the applicant should pursue all required city permits for the demolition. 2 looks at just providing additional pedestrian experience right at the sidewalk. And so that is recommending at least 5 shrubs with a mature height of 4 to 5 feet be planted within 15 feet of the sidewalk and either be listed on the city's native plant list or be consistent with residential gardens within the period of significance of the National Register District. So city plant list, you know, a nice azalea, a rhododendron plant, or I guess a lilac if you want to do something regarding a residential garden in the 19th century, just as some examples. And then 3, any future addition to the sanitary pump station will, of course, require historic review to ensure it's compatible with the district and provides adequate shielding or buffers to avoid any adverse effects. And I'll let Public Works provide any updates or anticipation of when they think the addition may happen. It is in the sewer master plan. It is something they are anticipating in the mid future, I believe. But I'll let them speak more with the specific dates. This is the Clackamas County tax map that kind of shows the odd tax lot structure. In this area, you'll see that the Clara Fields House is only portion of lot 2 of block 8. And then the pump station is portion of lot 3. So really, 402 McLoughlin took a bit of the, which was lot 7, took a little bit of, lot 1, apology. The blue arrow is hiding it. So as you can see, a little bit of lot 1 was, took a little bit of lot 2 over the years. So it says definitely an undersized lot and house. And the house is very close to or almost on the alley. So here's some photos of the Clara Fields House. You can see the alterations over time that's happened. You have the front elevation. This is showing the rear elevation. So there is some sort of kind of porch addition. Or it could be that this was, you know, at some point there was an addition to this back of house, and you see kind of an enclosed porch. And I'll provide that picture here. There is also kind of a 1940s accessory building at the back edge, which would be part of this proposal. I think knowing that there would be no house there and the Public Works is really not looking at trying to maintain and ensure there's no one breaking into an accessory building with no primary building. So that is also part of the proposal this evening. This shows some of the interior. So this is, if you were standing to your right, it's really looking into that. You're in the front, going through the front door. This is the front living room looking into the kitchen. What you see on your left is that hallway. You can kind of see the light through the hallway, and that moves into 1 bedroom. I believe there's 2 bedrooms and a bathroom on the left of the kitchen living room area. This is a generalized location of that accessory building. It doesn't show up in the kind of overlay of the site plan. So I put that in just a blue box to show its general location. So the options the board has this evening is to approve the proposal, adopt the findings with conditions, approve the proposal and modify the conditions and provide additional findings, deny the proposal and adopt associated findings, and continue the hearing and request more information. So I will stop. Before I stop sharing my screen, I will kind of bring it back to the board if they have any questions of staff, me, before we invite Public Works to make a presentation.
Christina, I do have a question. You mentioned deconstruction and relocation. My assumption is that that is in place to take a building that is in reasonably good shape, that it just happens to be in the wrong spot, and have that either sold off and moved, or break it down for parts. Is that kind of this philosophy?
Yeah. I mean, deconstruction is something that, if the building has especially old growth wood or a fair amount of interior wood to be repurposed, this building probably has a fair amount of asbestos and a fair amount that could potentially not be used for deconstruction, though I don't have a staff audit, but this is definitely one on the lower end of requiring deconstruction. In previous situations, for homes in much better condition, the board has required at least a notice to move, basically saying free to move. You take it, you pay for it. In the 20 years I've been here, I've yet to see anybody take on that, and generally because the buildings that come to us are generally have a reason why they are being approved for demolition. I mean, the board has the ability to deny demolition, so a house in really good condition most likely would be denied. So usually the homes that are approved for demolition usually have a good reason for it, and either are not good condition or not something that someone is looking to spend the money to move. So those are two options. If the board wants to pursue that while the applicant is speaking, I can go find a previous condition of approval related to deconstruction or moving, if the board wants to pursue that.
Thank you for clarifying that. I don't know. I kind of agree that the building is not in shape that anybody probably want to move it. So I just wanted to get confirmation on what that actually meant overall.
I would like to weigh in for a second. This is a building that was built in, what was it, 1902 or 19?
It is unclear. It is unclear. We have, in my staff report, it kind of showed different information. Some survey forms have it as 1900 or 1910, and we have another survey form that says 1940. So it is unclear the age, though I think the 1910 or 1900, there's some good cases to be made, but it's not definitive.
In reading the old one, but if there were a place within this area where an affordable home could be, where this could be stripped down to studs. When I rebuilt my house, I took it to studs, and and then wired it, and plumbed it, and did the things necessary. But when I would turn around and say that, we need affordable homes, and if there were a place, I would love to say, to me, to do demolition, just give it an outright go ahead for demolition without assessing the ability for the house to be gifted or moved to someplace else and made into housing that would be inexpensive or affordable housing is a desirable outcome over demolition, straight demolition. And the opportunity to recite the house should not be turned back or looked aside of, because we need housing, affordable housing. And if this house, granted, it's got vinyl siding, the windows have been altered significantly. But the question really comes back, if somebody had a lot and it could be put on a lot and a house could be made available at, after all additions and stuff, let's say it cost $200,000 or $150,000 to do it, and somebody could have a $200,000 house or $300,000 house after it's moved in value. This could be a win-win. So initially, I'd be more interested in in continuing this discussion because there's no hurry, but to evaluate and put out the request and say, we have a house of X square footage that somebody can have. And ideally, it's on a street in a location where it should facilitate it being moved relatively simply. Not that moving a house is simple, period, but why not? So that's my thought. I'll end it with that.
Any other questions for staff, me, before we hand it over to the applicant?
Christina, just, I guess, pursuing what Paul has mentioned there as a condition of approval, if the building was made available for a public to move it or deconstruct it because they felt it was, you might say, economically benefit on the other. Is that condition approval then mandate? What has historically happened before?
Sure.
And a certain period of time that.
Let me share my screen for a second. I have a condition of approval from 2019. It was another property in Canemah. So this is showing what a condition of approval could be added. It's just a standard, clear and objective. If you must do a 90-day noticing plan to do it to the following folks, and you must identify that the building is open for basically 100% onus of someone to pay for and move the house. And then the third one is the deconstruction plan. Oops, sorry. Apologies. I thought I had it, and I'm going to. If the house cannot be moved, the applicant or its designee shall submit an architectural deconstruction plan to city staff that shows that the salvageable pieces of the house will be removed or resale. The deconstruction plan is not intended to require full house hand deconstruction. Rather, it's aimed at assuring that materials that can be repurposed stay out of the landfill. So a deconstruction plan is saying, have you inventoried anything that can be repurposed or reused? And then that's really what a deconstruction plan is. And then what can't be repurposed or reused or is, not safe for reuse, then that would not be part of the salvage plan. So that would be, if the board wanted to, they could add, as shown here, conditions 1 and 3 to the approval.
So if that was added as a condition, then the only additional burden on the applicant is mandating a 90-day period of time to allow the public to respond if somebody wants it. Otherwise, then they can move forward. Is that correct?
Correct. And that's generally because the board has the ability to deny demolitions. And so if the board had enough findings to find the demolition would be denied, they wouldn't be approving this. If the board found that there was reasonable findings to allow the demolition, this would be an option the board if they wanted to open that up to allow response.
Okay, so I guess then ultimately my question would be for the applicant is if that's a significant burden, if their plans are such that that would be a significant burden, and that would weigh in on how I would look at it.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing for the moment and just know when it comes to deliberation, I can bring that page back up.
Sure.
We should turn it over to the applicant.
So we have Josh Wheeler and Vance Walker with Public Works.
Yes, hello. This is Josh Wheeler, Oregon City Assistant City Engineer. This application on behalf of Public Works. So one thing for everyone to consider is that this property, as Trina said, does not have historic value based on assessments that have been done and are in the record. This property was purchased by the City Commission with the intent of demolition and use for an expansion to the sanitary pump station, which has a need to be expanded in this area in approximately 5 10, 15 years, somewhere in there. It's a matter of getting those dollars appropriated for that. What we would ask is that there would be no conditions on trying to provide the property to someone else or to or deconstruct it. Reason being, there is a need for this pump station, and the reason we purchased this property is because it came up for sale. We knew that we wouldn't be ready today for that, but it was an opportunity to comply with a master plan, which has a need for that sanitary sewer improvement. With this property, we would not be able to do that improvement in a way that is cost effective. And then the other thing to notice is that, again, the city commission felt that this was an appropriate purchase for this reason, due to the master plan and due to the lack of historic value in this area. And it is Public Works' intent that when we do a project, we will make sure that that pump station conforms to historic regulations with respect to its looks and its style and all those things to make sure it fits with the neighborhood. We have every intent of doing that, and we would be coming back for an application for that at the appropriate time. But we would respectfully ask that the board approve this tonight with the conditions that were originally set forth, that we would need a permit, that we would appropriate landscaping to keep the area look appropriate until such time we have the funds to build the expansion of the pump station. Thank you very much. And if there are any questions, I'm here to answer those.
Hello, board. My name is Vance Walker. I'm the Assistant Public Works Director for the city. And thank you, Josh. That was very well put. A couple things I'd like to add quickly, if I may. We did have an engineering consulting company test the structure for lead and asbestos, and it did come back with a detect on lead and a fairly significant positive detect on asbestos throughout the structure. As Josh mentioned, the timing was such that we felt the need, as did the commission, to purchase this property while it was for sale. Granted, we don't have a firm date of which we would be doing improvements. However, I can tell you during day-to-day maintenance, when my staff needs to go work on the existing pump station, there's only room for one crew truck in that driveway. So if we were able to utilize the property, at least just the existing driveway on the property at 408, that would really help us in just our general maintenance, let alone in the future when we need that property for expansion. And something to keep in mind that in the future, if we do a major expansion, or if we redo the pump station, a DEQ requirement is that we have a permanently placed generator there. And as most of you know that are familiar with Canemah, for years we've had just a portable generator there, mainly in the fall and winter and spring when we lose power. We recently got a brand new generator that's dedicated for Canemah, but it is portable, again, because we don't have the room to put it. Also, as Josh mentioned, moving forward, when we do upgrades to the pump station, add to it, expand it, we absolutely will be coming back to the Historic Review Board and making sure that it complies with everything. So thank you very much for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Wheeler or Mr. Walker?
Yes. From looking at it and knowing the plat and map and everything, there's a 12-foot wide alleyway that exists right next to the pump station. Why is that? Is that being currently used as part of the access for servicing the pump station right now, or would that be in addition to what it is? And why isn't it not vacated as part of creating additional property adjacent to the pump station? Would be 12 feet by 12 by 100.
Yeah, so the alleyway currently not being used. It is as many alleyways are in Canemah. They are platted right-of-ways, which are not improved. To vacate that would be an option, but it would not provide enough land for a future expansion of that site. And so that's when we did put a plan together, we may choose to vacate the alley at that time, but that's not something that would be needed at this time.
And also, if I might add, where the alleyway is indicated on the plat map, that is directly over, I think it's a 30-inch storm line. There is a open catch inlet towards the back of the property, and that storm line goes directly through the middle of what appears to be that alley. So in future expansion, we would not be able to put assets on top of that storm line. We would need to put the assets on the 408 property.
But the alleyway still could be used. I know where the storm line goes through there. It is part of effectively Coffee Creek coming down through there. And now the next thing comes along, but still it's roads go over across the stuff, and it's still great for parking trucks and allowing that to go. Why, if we have a long, as Josh said, this could be 10 or 15 years from now, why isn't it appropriate that we give an opportunity through advertising to see if, in fact, there might be somebody around that would like a free building? It just seems to be over just deconstructing, which has expense, just trying to get the building potentially rehabbed. Miracles can happen, and all I know is that we need affordable housing in Oregon City, and this is a building that could be possibly used. And it wouldn't surprise me that somebody might say, "Okay, you mean it's free? Yeah, take it away at your expense." But if we work with somebody, again, I'm hoping that some way we could have a win-win, and you don't have an immediate need to have it torn down unless it's just for security purposes. But it looks like it's boarded up well, and why not try to see if we can't come up with some solution that is pro creating affordable housing?
So while I respectfully understand your desire for affordable housing and the reasons behind that, in my engineering opinion and my city perspective, I believe without this property, we will not be able to do the improvement that is going to be needed for that neighborhood in the future. The reason we need to demolish now is because it's a liability on the city to have that. To be able to convey to someone that they can take the property for free, they would likely not be able to do that based on various laws. When we convey property to others, we have to do it through a sale and an advertisement and things like that. We just did this recently where we did have to sell a property that I was involved in, and actually it's on the city commission, I think, next week. And we had to go through an entire process to be able to advertise that and sell the property. So it's not as simple as doing that. And in this case, I truly believe that this property does not have the structural capability or a reasonable capability to be redone in a way that would be financially reasonable for someone to take elsewhere and create as as a property to live in, or to sell this property off and do it for that purpose. I think that would go against the overall need of the city, and that there are many areas of affordable housing available for private development to do. And I think we should keep the ideas of development with the private developers. It's not good for the government to become developers, even selling off a house for that reason. And so it would be my professional opinion that it really, from a city perspective, needs to be in the lens of what our master plan needs in the next 10 to 20 years. If we would not have done this now, we would have had to likely try to condemn a property to become ours, which is a horrible process to go through, not just the actual process itself, but to put someone through that and to take their property away from them for these needs to be able to handle the capacity that is needed is just, I think we had a great opportunity here, just like we had an opportunity with buying the bottling company that became the Public Works building, that it was not something on our radar. It was something that came up as a project of opportunity. And I think this was a very smart decision by the Public Works and the City Commission. And again, I would ask that the board honor the City Commission's desire in purchasing this property.
Excuse me, but didn't we purchase the property already? My understanding is that the City Commission approved the purchasing of the property, so we own the property. So that part is done with. The next question is the next 15 years, and when you get around to putting it to developing something there, and if we need access through the 12-foot wide alleyway, which is bigger than the driveway, we have complete access into there for all the trucks using the alleyway. So the question really comes back is, why not have a 90-day grace period or something that turns around and says, okay, we've done due diligence, and that's all I'm asking for.
And this is Vance here, Mr. Edgar. I do agree with Josh. I would like to see the building demolished. If a 90-day grace period is asked by yourself and the rest of the board members, I don't see a problem with that. No, we are not doing anything in the next 90 days. As we've mentioned, I doubt anybody will want the house itself and to move it, but that's yet to be determined. But as Josh mentioned, it's not as easy as us donating property like that. I've been involved with a house sale here at the city, and I'm not sure how that'd work. But if that's the wish of the Historic Review Board to have a 90-day period to see if anybody wants to take the house, I'm okay with it. Josh may disagree respectfully, but as I mentioned, and you've seen the house, Mr. Edgar, there's not a lot there, and it does have lead and asbestos that needs to be abated. So, and when you mentioned the alleyway to work there, yes, you could park a vehicle there, but when you talk materials and equipment, and I'm not talking about the major redevelopment of the pump station. I'm talking about routine maintenance. We need to do some roofing on the existing pump station. That alleyway just isn't really enough, frankly, to do some of the projects that we would like to do to keep this pump station going until we have the funds to do a major upgrade. This pump station, I believe, is from the 50s. It had a upgrade in the 90s. It's a pretty high flow pump station, and obviously, as you well know, sir, it's a very crucial part of our infrastructure. So, again, I truly would be surprised if somebody wants to take what would probably be just some studs. The foundation is not great. I'd be surprised if it could be moved, but again, I'm okay if you're asking for a 90-day period for that to be reviewed, or how should I say, have people see if they want to take it. But at that point, I have no idea the process of how that would work, Mr. Edgar.
If you're okay for 90 days, at least I would just like to have a good college try to see if there is something out there that where somebody may want it, and I would be surprised if they do too. But I would like to. I think it's due diligence.
Do any other board members have any questions?
I guess I'm a little conflicted in that the burden on the city goes back to my question initially to Christina. If the burden is simply a delay of 90 days and there is no urgency, you might say, to remove the structure, that you might say is a rather minimal level of burden. But I hear Josh speaking to maybe some significant process if the building is made available. And of course, I'm not familiar with that aspect of it. What levels of process if a private party wants to come in and move it or deconstruct it? I think honestly, there's very small chance that anybody would be interested in deconstructing it. I don't see that there's any significant value there. If somebody wanted to move it, there's, I can understand Board Member Edgar's position to at least make it available, but if making it available then adds an additional level of burden on the city, I would be concerned about that. So I guess if there was any more insight on the actual burden to the city.
Yeah, so it is my understanding that when the city owns property and has a desire to offer that property to others, whether it is a vehicle that we take to auction, whether it or equipment that we take to auction, or whether it is a house in this case or a property, we have to go through the process of allowing the public to go through a public review period, as well as it has to go through a quotes period to do with the situation with selling equipment and vehicles at auction. There's a state law that follows under that and allows us to follow those processes. But with property, so land property, it does go through a much larger land use process. And so if not land use, I don't want to use that word, just a land process. And so we would be burdened with going forward with not as simple as making an advertisement and having an open house. Anyone can do that. It's much more than that. There are public requirements of notice. There are public requirements of how you do it. We would have to set up a proposal system. And so there is process involved that we would even have to look into some of those details because I've done property sales at the city and then I've done equipment things, but this unique type of situation I've not done. I just know it would fall under the land property type rules, and it would prevent us from demolishing that house sooner than later. And I'd like to say that our reason for owning it, although Vance said we would use it for access, which would make sense, that's not our reason for buying the property. It's just a secondary benefit, but it's not its purpose and it's not our intent of use in the long term. And so that was just a secondary thing of trying to provide information why this is an important property, but really that's a secondary reason. And then with respect to the 90-day period, we can do those things, but the longer the property goes in the state it is, the liability that the city takes on. And so I think the board should just weigh if the liability is a concern. As soon as weather becomes reasonable next year, when rains go away and weather improves, we do intend to demolish that as soon as the weather makes it reasonable to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you. If we don't have any more questions for the applicant, I believe we should probably move into board deliberations. Let's start with Board Member Powell.
Okay, thank you. I believe that there's an obvious need, to get this out so we have room for the pump station. I saw that house. It seemed to me that if there were, I appreciate the need for housing. I appreciate the need to recycle because I like to do that myself. But I believe this house is dilapidated enough. And I've also watched people try and move houses, and I would bet that that house would not even lift off the foundation in its dilapidated condition. And the other part of that, I would think that if it's going to move anywhere, the only place you'd move is west towards onto Canby area or in that area, because you're not going to get it through the highway tunnels. It just doesn't make sense to me. I think it's an expense the city does not need on top of everything else that we're currently working with. So I don't support sending that out or deconstructing it, but I do support them having it demolished.
Thank you. Board Member Green.
I'm basically seeing things about the way Board Member Powell is. We agree that we certainly need housing, but I think that particular building in its condition would be a very unlikely candidate. So I think it would be just procedure and process, and I appreciate the fact that they don't necessarily need to get the building out there right away, so that relieves some of the burden. But I'm also aware of the burden of process, and in this case, I think that it's very unlikely. I would concur with Board Member Powell that if it got moved, I don't think anyone would be able to deconstruct it. If it got moved, I would guess that it might get moved maybe for more agricultural purpose, may get moved west, and ultimately maybe would provide some agricultural housing or something like that. But I don't think it would be a marketable approach, just being familiar with construction costs and so forth. So I think it's almost a moot point in my mind. So I would be inclined to not burden the applicant further with other than the conditions that we already have suggested by staff.
Thank you. Board Member Edgar.
Oh, I still would like to have the 90 days, and I know home movers that move properties, and it's not that I'd ever thought about that in advance, but all I can turn around and say is that given a moment to try to assess the variables for 90 days, where they're not going to tear it down until spring, sometime in that time frame, giving us a little bit of just to look at it in a continuance. And if there is no reasonable opportunities that seem to come about quickly, I don't want to stand in the way of getting it tore down or adding undue expense. But I just right now, a continuance for 90 days because and then we take a breather moment and say, okay, what if it was to be moved, what would have to happen, and do it and without trying to incur a lot of expense and trying to figure out what it is. But right now, we don't even have that information coming available to us, other than just kind of guesstimates. And I don't think that that's fair for us to be making decisions on guessing about what it is or what the impacts would be. And in as much as that Vance has already said 90 days is acceptable, let's look at that period and just say, let's do a deal. If there's nothing that happens in 90 days, I'm 100% in agreement with Tim. Let's move ahead.
Thank you. I hate to see a building torn down, but I agree that this building doesn't seem to hold a lot of historical integrity. I agree with Board Member Edgar that if there wasn't a lot of process involved, putting it up or offering it up for 90 days to see if anybody would take it would be great. It sounds like even in offering it up, there's a lot of work that would have to be done by city staff just to simply put it out there as an option for someone to take. At least that's what I'm hearing as far as what Mr. Wheeler and Mr. Walker have said. I can't imagine anybody moving that building. And it's so much work and so much effort to move a building. I just remember when they moved the Morris Marks building through downtown Portland, they had to take it through Portland State, and they had to cut down limbs of trees, and there were power lines that had to come down, and they were moving it like a mile at the most. It was a huge undertaking, and I can't imagine anybody going through that for this tiny little house with not much historical integrity.
There are a lot of lots right down on the other side of McLoughlin going towards Canby. There are the building lots that are approved that are in this zone that are vacant. Right, where in the next within 300 yards that exist and that have nothing on them.
That's probably true, but I mean, who owns them, and do they want this building on them?
Have they ever been given an opportunity?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
I don't know.
Like it's so close.
It sounds like there's a lot of questions surrounding what it would actually take to put this up for 90 days. It sounds like a lot of work to me. But if the majority of the board feels that that's the way to go, it sounds like the majority of the board feels like it's probably not the correct step. But we can talk about that.
Chair Ferry, I would say if that house were in better shape, and I don't mean perfect shape, I mean better shape. If it had already been inspected by, where we've seen the inspections come through, where it's obvious got problems. I mean, to me, it just doesn't seem worth the investment of our staff time. To get it even out there for 90 days. I appreciate what Paul's saying. I really do. And if it were a better house, or if it were something that made sense, I'd say yeah. But I mean, the reality is I just don't see anybody investing the money it's going to cost to move it, rebuild it from the ground up, which is what they're going to have to do in a foundation. The wood, that's the product that's in that house, is probably not worth it. And I'm not a contractor like Mr. Green, but I will tell you, I mean, I can't imagine spending that kind of money to move that house. When you could build something equally as low income, if you will, on a lot somewhere else. So, that's kind of my feeling. I just don't think it's worth the trouble. And I totally agree that we do need low income housing. I just don't think this is the one.
That was sort of my assessment based on what I was hearing as well.
I concur with what Board Member Powell said. So I guess I would prepare to make a motion that we approve GLA 23-31 and HR 23-10 with the conditions of approval recommended by staff.
I'd second that.
All right. Board Member Powell.
Aye.
Board Member Egger.
A.
Board Member Green.
Aye.
Chair Ferry.
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you so much. I think that ends the public testimony section of our hearing. And I believe we have a work session item to discuss, which is the improving the historic review approval process for solar panels, and possibly revisiting HRB policy number 12.
So I have about a 3 or 4 slide presentation just to give an overview of where we're at. And then I have a couple questions for the board. Today is really more of a time to talk about kind of the elements of this issue you find compelling, and then to kind of give staff direction on the outreach process for potentially amending the policy. So give me 1 second. Okay. Oops, that is not the one I want. All right. Let's try this one more time. All right. So, okay. So, this is item number 7 on the HRB work plan, and it is revisiting HRB's solar panel policy. So, as discussed in August and during the camp preservation presentation, which was the National Association of Preservation Commissions came together. We all came together and looked at various aspects of the historic review process and the Secretary of Interior standards. And one item that the board really wanted to look at was, what are other folks doing about solar panels in the U.S.? And we had a great presentation from one of the preservation planners in Denver. And really, there was this discussion that solar panel installations on visible elevations of historic buildings are becoming more acceptable due to the growing awareness of the importance of renewable energy. You know, previously there was kind of more jurisdictions made a much harder tack that said, anytime you can see a solar panel, it doesn't meet the Secretary of Interior standards. Some jurisdictions like us, really emphasizes the solar panels to be on non-primary elevations and secondary roofs. And the city of Denver kind of took it even farther, which really looked at in what scenarios could or would be allowed on primary elevations. And so this real process this next year is looking to see if there is something that could be changed to policy 12 that really looked at, is there a scenario where there could be a type 1 staff review of solar panels on primary elevations? And so I'm going to next slide. So if the board decides to revise that policy, staff has proposed a public outreach strategy, which I'll show in the next slide, to ensure that historic homeowners and neighborhood associations can express their opinions to the board. Following community feedback, the HRB recommendations, there'll be revisions to the policy. And this is a lot like what you just went through with middle housing design standards. The board held work sessions and provided a tentative draft document that was then presented to the city commission at their work session. And then with their feedback, the board formally adopted it at their hearing. So this would be kind of the same piece. Would be there'd be public outreach, a review, and if a draft red line proposal was agreed upon by the board, it would be presented in front of the city commission before formally adopting by the board. So I kind of have a little layout of process A kind of first step would be one HRB member and staff would meet with the McLoughlin and Canemah Neighbor Association. So I'd work to schedule to be on the next meeting to kind of lay out the issues related to solar panels, what we've learned, what we do today, and get kind of initial feedback from the two organizations. The next would be kind of a community work session. We would send letters to all of the historic property owners, about 500-ish of the property owners in Oregon City, to either come to the work session, more open house, or potentially provide an online survey for those who couldn't attend. After that feedback, if the board has direction on any changes, it would be at notice meetings and at some point presented to the city commission and then adopted. So that's kind of the general layout of the process. So I've noticed, I haven't really looked at content. This is really the process by which the board could choose to make revisions to the policy. So really tonight, your real only direction tonight after you kind of have conversations about what you learned in August, what you read in the attached literature, kind of what are your major issues you think should really be discussed. Is this something you still want to pursue to look at potentially allowing more staff type 1 options for visible solar panels on main elevations? And do you want to proceed with the outreach I outlined tonight, or do you want any revisions to that approach? So I can ask for any feedback from the board or stop sharing my screen, but really this is kind of a open conversation about what you think is the most compelling piece of this issue that you think is important for us as a group to kind of wrestle with this year. And I can stop sharing for the time being.
So in looking through the information, it seemed to me that what was presented was the Denver sort of way of approaching solar panel. And it seemed like they were allowing solar panels on the sides of a front-facing gable building, whereas sometimes if they're visible from the street, we've had sort of a problem with that. But they still sort of preferred it to be in the back as opposed to right in the front. And then I think directly over the entranceway is something that we still don't allow. We don't allow, and they didn't want to accept. I thought that their guidelines were very much in line with ours, except that maybe they allowed for some extra, concessions as for allowing for solar applications, whereas maybe things would come before the board. And I'm okay with talking about sort of some of those places that we might be able to have. How do other board members feel about sort of possibly amending our regulation?
Well, at the meeting that we had, the training, one of the things I felt about Denver was that they were a little too liberal with their with allowing some of the photos they showed. I thought they were a little too liberal on some of the front facades. I didn't really have a problem with the sides, but my biggest concern is on a well, let's see. So maybe a hip roof. You don't want it on the front, and I understand theirs now is that's what they said as well. But gabled, it just seems to me if you have dormers and you don't, it seems awkward to me to have a dormer in the middle of the front facade and then have solar panels coming down. And I mean, I realize maybe that's where we do it. Maybe we allow Christina to review those and approve those, unless it's on a front gable, where it's just so obvious that we have to review that. And it just seemed to me that some of the photos, and that's what I was working off of, is some of the photos they showed, and they just had way more than I felt they should on a historic home. And maybe some of the photos weren't historic homes. Hard to tell, but they showed a lot of different photos, and some of them kind of shocked me on what they allowed. And it seems to me that I'm all for solar panels. I'd like them to be as far back as possible away from view, but if on the front, that's where my big concern is, from the street facing side. If that makes sense.
I would like to echo the same type of opinion with Tim. I think that I too have a plug-in vehicle, and I try to think about this a lot. But when they get too much of a patchwork, where it starts to detract from the historic character and nature of this historic building, sometimes there's too much, and in that posture, I think that it does need to come back to the Historic Review Board for approval, and I don't want to see it detract or make insignificant of the architectural features that we're trying to preserve or trying to highlight, or we think need to be highlighted because of the nature of what they are. And I think that some of these solar panels, the placements can be subjective, maybe in the wrong way. And I just think that we just need to continue to be able to have a review and not to limit somebody by code, but to review them to make sure that what they do is reasonable. And that's there's a degree of reasonableness that needs to be part of it. But the Denver code sure has a lot of potential to it, and I think we would definitely use it as a framework for what we create, because a lot of good thought is there. Thank you.
Board Member Green.
Excuse me. Yeah, I kind of concur with Board Member Edgar on some of the installations that are patchwork that might be a little bit closer to guidelines. Are, in my mind, are a little more jarring. I found it interesting looking through the materials again, and of course, with our packet came the Denver's new standards. And as I looked over the pictures, it's kind of interesting. The one that they showed us not approved on the first page on the right-hand side actually is less jarring to me, and it was not approved in their case because it was not more than 3 feet from the front wall, which is their base requirement. But in that case, the array of panels was just an even rectangle. And one of the approved designs shows missing panel where there's a pipe vent and so forth. And it's, to me, that patchwork appearance makes it more jarring. So you kind of circle back to objective standards versus subjective standards. And of course, as a board, we grapple with subjective standards. That's what we're tasked with, and we just demonstrated we don't necessarily always agree, but that process, I think, has value. And I guess what I came up with after I kind of reviewed the material and so forth, looking at what other municipalities are doing and so forth, I don't see just a big swing to allowing solar panels anywhere and everywhere. And I think we would agree with that. So when I look back at our policy 12, I think it's really not that far off the mark. I guess in my own mind, what I came away with, I'm not sure it's worth entering the process that would be required for revisions unless we saw a clear area of improvement. And I'm not sure that I do based on what other municipalities are doing. They're a little bit scattershot. That's what I gleaned from our camp seminar there. And I don't think we're that far off the track with what we've got at this point. The other part of that being is that we all realize this is kind of a dynamic industry, and what seems appropriate today, 5 or 10 years from now, may be entirely different. So I find the fact that if it's clearly a removable installation, it's less of a problem on a historic building, and that can be decided on a case-by-case basis. And actually, two aspects, I guess, that come up in my mind, and that is our policy 12. One consideration is that the panels be more or less the color of the roofing color. Well, the panels we realize now are going to be basically black or matte black or very dark charcoal, or they will perform. So that's just what is available. So the question then is, should they be approved on a light colored roof? So I don't think it's worth a policy change to address that. In short, well, I guess this isn't very short, but it doesn't seem to me like our policies are show a glaring vacancy or disconnect that needs to be addressed.
Well, we asked, we all went through, I think so far this year, we've gone through 2 solar panel, and we all had questions on it. So something's not right in our policy 12, that it isn't giving us enough information. I think that's what we asked Christina to, get us more data so we could in fact enhance our program. I think you're right, Robert. I think it is a pretty good step, but I think we do need to change some things. I think we need to talk more about shingles. When they're available, which they are now, but when they're more readily available, freestanding, detached in the historic district. I mean, we just make a very small statement about it. And I think we need to be more specific about those things. It would make our job easier, I think, if we had more clarity. And so, I think this document that came from Denver, I think that would be a great thing to talk to neighborhood associations about, in that outreach that Christine was talking about. Get some input from those folks as well, both Canemah and McLoughlin, because I'm sure we'll get plenty of comments about it. But I mean, looking at their drawing that they sent, it actually looks pretty good. I was just rereading it, and the hipped roof and the dormers, they show that they don't even allow it on the front face. So, maybe we just need to be more clear, because the front of ours shows it right on the front face, and that's where my concern is. So I do think we need to have a policy change. I think we need to at least talk further about it and get input from the community. So I think the outreach would be a great idea. And if we come up with, even if we make minor changes to it, at least it'll be easier for all of us and those who follow us to be able to make decisions.
So I've got a question for Christina, then. I think I'm maybe seeing 2 possible paths here. One is information, you might say, for us as board members, which would maybe fall into the category of further education, further resources, or whatever, in trying to inform us in making decisions. versus, am I correct that the notion of changing guidelines would be more a notion of specifically identifying standards then that installations would be approved at staff level and would not come to the HRB? Is that correct?
There's two things actually. That's a good question. Yes, one option would be if there's policy direction to amend HRB policies to provide more clarity of when something is a type 1 staff decision and when it's not. And one thing I kind of was hearing from the board, haven't heard it quite as loud here, but a little bit at the August meeting, a little bit before, is a lot of the reviews the board did when they did a bunch of reviews in the last 2 years where gabled roofs where the large south-facing, elevation, it was not allowed in a type 1 level, but their solar study said they needed that to actually have a capable solar program. So that is one thing to think about. I think on a staff level, all the ones that you saw that were that front gabled where it was facing south and it needed it in order to get the solar study to work. Is that scenario? Are there parameters of so many feet back from the front and things like that, which is allowed in Denver? Would it make sense to allow that as a type 1 with those caveats related to the solar study, or do you still want to see those at a hearing to look at the particulars? So that's something to look at. If things related to a type 3 review, that would be added on to the design guidelines for alterations. So that is something that the board absolutely can do. It's the same process, just like we did design guidelines for new construction. We would go through the same of coming up with a draft change and then going to the city commission. So if there's ever, if through this process, there's direction for type 1 reviews, that's the HRB policies. If there's further direction for type 3 reviews, that would be amended onto the design guidelines for alterations.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I totally concur with Board Member Powell that we want to be as informed as we can in order to make appropriate decisions. And if that can be, you might say, preset in some way with better guidelines that the public is aware of, what they can expect from the HRB. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. That's one thing, but the other aspect of it would be, for instance, if as a board we looked at most municipalities, let's say, are pretty much blanket allowing them, other than really extreme, landmark. They showed some pictures of buildings with very intricate mansard roof and so forth, and where it wouldn't be. But if there was you might say, clear and objective deal where they are allowed on the front, that could be done at staff level, that would be a significant change in the policy. But I don't think we're there. It doesn't sound like. I think that as a board, we still feel like they need to be, somewhat obscured if possible. And so it does come down to a case-by-case subjective decision that would come to the board. So I'm not sure that guidelines that would move projects to type 1 is necessarily what we're looking for, but I think we do all feel the need for as much information as we can to make the decision. I'm not sure if that necessitates taking us down that full demanding process for revisions or not. I guess I'm trying to figure that out in my own mind.
I would turn around and say, Dave, well said. I agree that we all want. I think we all want to facilitate intelligently the installation and movement of more solar panels. But in doing so, we do not want to facilitate the destruction or making of a historic building not relevant by doing something that is that subjectively we determine as a board is inappropriate. And so some of this stuff just needs to be come back to the board, and I can see this trying to get the codes and get our thinking more closely identified, but not everyone understands historic preservation or historic architecture much, or has the passion that many of us do, because we wouldn't be on the HRP if we didn't. And within that passion that we have, it's not equal with that of a lot of people that don't. And therefore, I think it's important that that some of the decisions that need to be made by people that really will do their homework and care and are passionate about historic buildings and preservation. Anyway, so even the citizen input can be misleading in some cases.
Chair Ferry, do you mind if I?
No, go ahead.
I've been so I guess what I'm hearing is at this point you're not necessarily ready, and maybe Christina, you already said this, I'm just repeating in my own words, not necessarily ready to propose any kind of criteria for more to increase the types of type 1 reviews, but you could use some more criteria for the type 3 reviews. So it seems like that may be a place to start with the policy that we've got, and maybe we can bring something back and maybe look at some of the other decisions that have been made. I think what we've talked about a little bit on the staff level is that we're not always sure how to advise applicants, and I don't know if the decisions are always consistent for when solar panels get approved or when they don't. So we could put our heads together and bring back some different kind of standards and criteria. I do think that we should go out to the community, but maybe that's after you all feel comfortable with the question for the community, or proposing some kind of new standards that you'd like to at least let them know about before they come to the board. So maybe we can kind of break down the steps a little bit and just look at what would make your job easier or a little bit more clear and less subjective.
I agree.
I think.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Christina.
Oh, I absolutely agree. It sounds like we're not ready yet. So I would recommend we continue this work session to January, and we can continue talking this evening and kind of really provide staff things of what you would like, in regards to, it sounds like more design guidelines for alteration direction, and almost having a one pager on solar panels for type 3 review is kind of what I'm hearing for the board. And maybe through this conversation, something comes out for HRB policy 12 for more clear direction for type 1, but I'm really hearing this is a type 3 conversation of wants from the board. Is that?
I don't disagree. I think that's true. I think I think our goal should be to try and make it reasonable for you as staff to speak to the public about their queries about solar and make a staff or a decision, be able to make a decision. Other than, I guess what we probably should be talking about is what's what specifically do we want to look at? I mean, if it's on the side, I'm not that concerned. It just depends. Maybe it's location specific. So that's I think where probably most of our concerns are about is, I'd love to be able to say, yeah, if it goes on the rear slope, side slope, I'm okay with it. But then again, then you'll be something next to the Ermitager and you go, oh yeah, maybe that wasn't a good idea. So
The Ermitager House is in a vibrant urban historic district.
yeah.
I can come back with maybe some scenarios in January just to confirm this is what the policy allows as type 1. Here are variations of what the board saw as type 3 over the last couple of years. Here are variations they haven't seen but could see, and maybe we kind of get some yays, nays, or maybe there's scenarios that you hadn't thought of that would make sense to be in a type 1, or maybe there's scenarios that you support but want to be in a type 3. And maybe I think what Aquila is saying is, if we're talking to an applicant and they're in this kind of not type 1, but probably it will be approved on a type 3, what are you looking for? If we're telling an applicant, well, they just want to see just in case, and these are the things they'll be looking at, you'll probably get approved, but you'll need to do a hearing. Like that would be helpful for me as staff. Or, that's a hard one. I don't know if the board will approve that. That's kind of that direction is really helpful for applicants.
Yeah, makes sense.
So I can come back in January. We can have these scenarios and maybe hold off on the public outreach approach till we get a little bit more a clear direction of what we're looking at.
I like that, Christina. I have a lot of faith in you and your skills and intelligence in helping us through this thing. But I thank you, and I think that I will totally agree with this approach. Let's take another kind of uplift the document one more time, see if we can get closer. And then when we're closer, then where we don't lay our dirty laundry out in front of the public, then I will be much happier.
I have a question, because it seems like oftentimes with solar, when people come before us, it's something that the solar company has presented to them, and it's something that involves, sort of a quantity of solar output or solar, generation ability. And it's really hard sometimes to weigh what the solar company is pushing versus the aesthetics of how it might look in the neighborhood. Because, you want people to get the best outcome from it, and it's important that they get the best outcome from it. But sometimes it's hard to know, like, how much the solar company is pushing something versus how much is what's actually needed for generating enough energy to do what they need it to do with their house. I feel like sometimes maybe it's not so much an aesthetic question for us, but I mean it is, but it's also just for me, maybe it's just not quite understanding like the logistics of how the solar is, how much solar is needed.
Right. So I absolutely. And I'll do what I can to do a little more research when, a solar study is provided, what is the minimum needed? But then, it's a two-part question. Yes, do we agree that this is the minimum needed to make a project pencil? because you're not going to do a solar project with 2 panels, probably. And so, but also, is there a conflict between only approving the minimum, or in what situation is a solar study helpful for the board to make a determination? And how do you read that study, and what information do you get out of it? Because a solar study can provide something if the board is asking the right question. Because more is usually better in regards to a penciling of a project. But when a solar study says we need at least 7 panels, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of a couple instances where that's happened. So, that.
And I've had this concern about salesmen. It's almost like we have these window salesmen coming through Canemah, wanting to tear out historic windows and put in something that that's low E, but it has no relevance to the historic design and dimensions and appearance. And they've been sold down the road, and I wish we were going directly to some of these window companies and saying, hey, cut off this stuff. I'll keep it clean. But I get really upset when I get a letter saying coming to my house telling me I should pull out all my historic windows and put in something that detracts. And as far as they're concerned, that's perfectly right.
Yeah. Well, is there any more information that you need from us to sort of information gather? Or
I think I have it. So in January, I'm going to come back with, it's almost like a different slide. Like today we allow this as a type 1. Today we allow this as has to be a type 3. And then maybe, for example, this is what Denver has as a type 1 or type 3. So I'll probably show lots of different scenarios so you can kind of get a handle of where we're different, and then, where things are type 3. Is there anyone that you think is a scenario could move to a type 2, or of these type 3s? I think what board member Powell said, can you throw it in bucket? Like, never should we approve this bucket, or there's lots of ways we could approve these if viewed at a hearing bucket. So that might provide better direction. And then, after discussions, an output can occur. And it could just be, further design, further guidance on when you are proposing solar panels in front of the Historic Review Board, which technically is a addendum to the alterations. But I do have to say, I think there are. I mean, I think there's when you have a side gable house, those have been all of the versions, at least that I've been involved, that have had to go in front of the board. And so I think there is some view of maybe the back third or the back half that may make sense to make that as a type 1. And so I think that's a reasonable change to the policy for solar panels. So that I think that may reduce the amount of hearings you get, because that's what generally we've had, or at least we could tell them, because people don't like to go to the board. So oftentimes they're more than happy to keep on working to see what they can get in a type 1. So, and then the ones that go to the board just can't. I mean, they've tried. I mean, believe me, there's back and forth emails and it doesn't work. We can't do it. We need this elevation. So they don't come to you because they want to. They come to you because they have to. So that's probably one on staff level. I think it'd be nice to get a little more direction on those back thirds or back halves.
Yeah.
I agree.
Sounds good.
That sounds great to me.
All right. Well, I'll return in January with more information. And thank you all for this discussion.
Thank you.
And we'll have hopefully a good finished product and a second success story to our 2023-2025 work plan. So,
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Are there any communications that need to happen?
I have two. One, for folks who haven't been very involved in the newspaper or what's on our website. The city has been working with ODOT over the last couple months on phase 3 of the McLoughlin Blvd Enhancement Plan, which is really looking at streetscape improvements on both sides from about 10th Street around the curve of 99E to the railroad tunnel in Tumwater Village. This is the hardest part of our phase 3, is the most complicated part because it involves the viaduct. Which is a structure, a bridge structure from 10th to about 8th, and then the historic Oregon City Westland Bridge. And really, how do you bring pedestrian and bike traffic along the riverside to really close the gap in our kind of pedestrian and bike space, but also our waterfront, our open space connections. And starting December 3rd through 22nd, there'll be a virtual open house with a couple of scenarios of how to have a walking shared use path that either goes kind of below the arched bridge. There's one version where it kind of goes through 2 of the bridge spans. So I really do encourage you to take the virtual open house. The Oregon City Westland Bridge is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. It is owned and maintained by ODOT, and they have pretty strict standards. And no version will they do not want to pursue a version that has an adverse effect to the bridge. And so we've been working closely with ODOT's historic folks and kind of what variations have the least impact on the bridge. It's definitely something that's being looked at, but I wanted to get you involved. And when the link goes live, I'll send it to you via email on December 6th. And then for HRB interviews, for those who have submitted for HRB interviews, Jacob Wiley, our city recorder, is working on providing a special date for interviews. So he will be contacting you directly on that date.
Thank you.
And that's all I have.
I would like to make one comment based upon what Christina said, that the importance of this improvement area along to the mill site is not simple but critical, in as much as how do we get people in and out of the mill site or Tumwater. How do you pronounce the
Tumwater Village.
Tumwater Village when it gets developed? Because if we put more people, pedestrians crossing at Main Street and McLoughlin, Highway 99E, that intersection closes down just with pedestrian crossings. And then everything goes sideways. And so by creating a adequate and necessary additional pedestrian ways to get back and forth across Highway 99E at this location is more than critical, just more than critical. And we have to think smart about it, because I think we all would like to see something positive happen at the mill site. And I think that the Grand Ronde wants it to happen and have the funds to make it happen. But if we have 3,000 visitors coming to that site a day, how do they get in and out? And boy, I tell you what, it's I've done tests on it, and it's not simple.
All right. Well, just to remind everybody, there's no December meeting, so we will see everybody in the new year. And I want to thank you all. I know some people's terms are up and are not reapplying. And for all those who are done with your HRB. I just really thank you all for your hard work and your volunteers, and super trite, but volunteers make cities work. So thank you all for your commitment to the city and to preservation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
We're hoping to meet in person in January.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I had 3 updates we looked at City Hall for potentially being in person, and with the transition to the Robert Libke of the City's Commission and Planning Commission, the ability to review packets digitally just isn't there. So while kind of advisory groups that don't have complicated land use packets, they can meet at City Hall. I think really Robert Libke will be our new location in person. So we'll be working to make sure we have enough hearing devices, and we can get all you to have the hearing and the audio you need. But our goal is to meet in person in January at the Robert Libke Safety Building.
Great.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Okay. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Holidays.
Goodbye.